I think good marketers have to have great taste. And how do you make it look great as well as it being effective at driving demand and revenue?
Deanna, my friend, how are you doing?
I'm good. We are twinning today. I'm loving
this. I know.
This.
This was not coordinated in any way whatsoever. Nobody will believe us, but those not getting the full video experience, we're both wearing the same Secret Sushi gear, the same Secret Sushi shirt. Looks like it made
Spirit wear.
Spirit wear. There you go. Pom-poms are off camera right now. But I'm so excited to share with you some creations that are going on at my house with my son. Just before we started to record this, he's like, I'm like, hey man, I'm about to start recording. He's like, but Dad, take a look at this. Now, for whatever reason, he is on a taco kick. And it's funny because he calls everything street tacos. So we go someplace to go to a Mexican restaurant. Like I haven't been to like Taco Bell or something for, I don't even know how long, 10 years or more. My son's never been to Taco Bell. And we go to a Mexican restaurant and I don't remember where it happened the first time, but he's like, got this fascination with what exactly a street taco is. And he thinks that it's a taco that happened to have ground beef in it, which, obviously a street taco, at least how I understand it, is a real, just kind of authentic, like I've got a cart or stand right on the street. Taco. It could have any kind of meat in it or whatever, but some reason he's just taco. I want to have tacos now, which is fine because I'm down with that. But whenever we go to these restaurants, he's like, I want a street taco. And I was like, okay, well, there's chicken, there's beef, there's, fish. And he's like, I want a street taco. I was like, what do you think that this is like specific meat that they scrape off the street? No, that's not what it is.
Right. What are your expectations with this street taco?
Yeah, yes. And he thinks like because a lot of times on the menu, they literally say like street tacos.
Right.
And so, my wife made tacos a couple nights ago, and I think we actually did it twice in the last week. And she's like, I'm going to start making the tortillas. And it's like, all right, so today's the day they're making tortillas, which means fun. Apparently lunch, dinner today, we're going to have our street tacos out of our kitchen. But look at this. He's so proud, right? Here's one of his.
It's gorgeous. There's
one of his tortillas, but that wasn't what he was most proud of. So for those, again, listening on, describe what you're seeing on this.
I'm describing, let's see, I'm seeing a beautiful flat tortilla. It's got some rigidity. Oh, it flopped right when I said that. So yeah, it looks a little stiff. Might maybe need a little longer on the griddle.
Well, I think it's a little more toasted than it should be for not eating it at the moment, is what it is.
Yes.
But the thing he was,
gorgeous,
and now I've got a little tortilla condensation on my desk, apparently, so it was still warm when I got it. But here's the thing he's proud of.
Wow. What am I seeing?
This is like a dime-sized tortilla that he made.
Okay,
so
that
he's
is
like,
impressive.
Baba, I made the big ones and the small ones. And for him, Idris is very fascinated by extremes. So for him, he's like, let's see what it looks like to make the world's smallest in the entire world tortilla. And he was telling me, just as he was handing it to me, that he's going to, it's perfect size to put one cilantro leaf on it and one chunk of tomato on it and one, grain of ground beef on it. Go for it, kid. But these are what he's proud of right now. But
it's the perfect size for Remy from Ratatouille, who's a little rat. He would love that little taco, little tortilla.
That's awesome. Well, what's your favorite street taco meat of choice?
Oh, I love a carne asada. Chicken is always hit or miss. Chicken's my go-to, just in general, but it's sometimes they didn't just make it. And you could tell it's like a little tough, so that's always hit or miss. You got to know the right spots. But this Idris's street taco everything being under that umbrella reminds me of my husband calls anything with a tortilla chip nachos, like including like a bag of Doritos. Those are nachos. So it gets a little confusing when we're ordering nachos at a Mexican restaurant. But yeah.
What he's asking for is like, can I have some guacamole with a side of nachos to
yes. They're like, what do you want on the nachos? He's like, no, just plain. Like, what?
Plain nachos. Yeah, like when Idris gets hamburgers, which he also loves, and he's just like, just give me the bun and the patty. And it's like, come on, man. You're not, tomatoes, sauce. Nope, just give me the bun with the patty. I don't know why that's the way he is. But shifting to our episode today, there's actually a little bit of a connection between you and our guest and me and our guest, Kyle Lacey.
Yes.
So Kyle, years and years and years ago, had a company, an agency called Brand Swag. All the way back in 2007, he started it. And I started Secret Sushi in 2006. And at some point or another, and I think we even talked about it on this episode, might have been through FriendFeed, which was a company that I think ultimately Facebook bought. It was a social media company where a lot of us actually really did connect. Like we, as peeps online, we connected and we got to know each other and everything. And that's where I believe I met Kyle many, many years ago. And then somehow we did some small projects for Kyle, just a couple small projects, and I got to know him then. And then he's since, kind of taken off from there. But then your connection is...
Kyle, you don't know this, but we're connected. I'm right down the street. No, I don't know exactly where Kyle lives, but we are in the same city, in Indianapolis, which I loved when I could see in his background, he's repping our city. So I was like, yes, my guy.
Yeah. And so Kyle, your little Venn diagram for Deanna and I here for the day today. But I was so excited to talk to Kyle. Kyle is considered one of the top 50 CMOs to watch in 2024 as we kind of lead into the end of 2024 by Pavilion. He has been at multiple companies in marketing leadership roles, including Salesforce, written multiple books, and is currently the CMO at Jellyfish. Couldn't be a cooler name for a company outside of Secret Sushi, huh?
No doubt.
Yeah, and so we talk about all kinds of stuff, including, I'm trying to remember all the cool stuff that we talked about, because I was really reminiscing a bit on how much time had passed since he and I had, initially connected, and how much he had grown. But he talks about his career and sort of how purposeful he is in those transitions through those businesses, and how he sort of views the job, that he has. And I think that aspiring marketing leaders and those that are currently in the job that as marketing leaders can learn a lot from this conversation with him. And next time when we do our little retreat, like we did, our company retreat, we came out your way earlier this year, Deanna, to Indianapolis. Next time we'll now know to reach out to Kyle and invite him to have street tacos with us, which we didn't have street tacos, but we ate at a really good Mexican restaurant over there. What is it? By Ironworks in Indianapolis, right?
Yes. Ironworks and Bottle Works. Those are kind of like where we hung out in the city. So much fun. Maybe Kyle has a good street taco recommendation. I bet he does.
I should have asked him. It's a little late now, but well, here's my interview with Kyle Lacey. Mr. Kyle Lacey, sir, how are you doing in your neck of the woods today?
I am doing excellent. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to see you.
It's a pleasure to see you too. I actually, so excited to see you that I even modeled my haircut after you and everything. Yes. You still rock it better than I do, but I knew you were here and wanted to make sure we looked good side by side on video.
I appreciate that.
No, but remembering that I'm going to talk to you today, I was like, oh my gosh, I actually knew Kyle way back when, and I haven't talked to him. I was like looking at LinkedIn a little bit and trying to even see how far back it is, because you've done so much since then. But brand swag, man. What does the word brand swag bring up to you?
Actually, what's hilarious is that I shared some photos from the brand swag days with my team this week because Lorraine Ball, who was at Round Peg, who helped me start the company, she had connected with some of my team members and mentioned me. And so I actually found the picture of me standing in front of a garage where I had spray painted the word brand swag on the side of it. But that was 2008.
Wow.
That was 2008. I left. Yeah, it was like I joined ExactTarget in 2012.
Well, let's talk about how you got started, because for me, I have experience having met you when you were at Brand Swag, and you were nice enough. We got to do a couple small things for you at Secret Sushi at that time. And so I'm not sure where you started before that, but how did you get started in marketing?
Lorraine Ball, who I just mentioned. When I graduated college in 2006, I was trying to find a job, and she gracefully hired me to do graphic design for her. And knowing that eventually I wanted to start my own agency, which became Brand Swag, and she let me use her office to build the company initially. So yeah, I mean, I got started early in marketing because my father, but that's a lot, he's been an entrepreneur for years. And I was doing a lot of the Dan Kennedy postcard direct mail sending stuff for him back in the late 1990s. But, ultimately it came from my father, but Lorraine's the one who set me up.
And graphic design is one thing, but you then transition. I mean, you're out there in Indianapolis. We see that sign behind you. I think I was sharing just before our call that I was actually out there recently. We have teammates out in Indianapolis, and we decided to do our team retreat there literally in May.
Cool.
And when I was out there, I did think of you and the hub of folks that are actually out there, because oftentimes, especially you're working with technology companies, folks often think of the Bay Area, where I'm at, as kind of, a technology hub, and some other areas and everything. But Indianapolis has got a lot going on, and you worked with a number of companies that have their roots in whole or in part in that area, right?
Yeah. And I think a lot of Indianapolis is not a small city, but compared to a Boston or New York or San Francisco, it is. So I think for a lot of the smaller big cities, having one major technology company impact is important. And ExactTarget was that for Indianapolis when we were bought by Salesforce, and Salesforce still has an office here. And I think a lot of those people have since gone off and have, it's like the ExactTarget ecosystem, where you go off and you build companies and you get more experience and you keep working together. And that's what's made Indianapolis such a cool place to be since 2015, when the sale was done. Or when the acquisition happened. And it's just a cool play. It's cool to have like High Alpha as an example, which is a venture studio that founder of ExactTarget created, has built a lot of companies here, has invested in even more. And so it's just a cool little group. I mean, it's a cool community to be a part of in general.
How did now you talked about ExactTarget, but how did you make that leap from the Brand Swag days where you're talking about graphic design to then ultimately, your foray into impacting marketing from an execution and strategy side?
Yeah, I mean, were you on Friend Feed?
Yes. That's,
yes.
I think,
all right.
Possibly how we met. That's
possibly how we met. I met a lot of people back in the day because of that. So social is the reason why. Like when I started doing graphic design, I mean, I have a business degree, and graphic design was just a passion of mine. So I don't have any training in it. So as we started competing with more agencies in Indianapolis, I was 23, 24 years old. We realized we weren't winning anything. Like we just weren't. Like it just wasn't. We weren't competing. And that's fine. And so we transitioned to sell social. So we sold MySpace pages. We tried to sell training on LinkedIn and Facebook and running ad campaigns and all this stuff in 2008, 2009. And because of that, got Twitter Marketing for Dummies, book deal, Branding Yourself book deal, speaking in a lot of places, and ExactTarget hired me to do training for their sales team because they had just bought a social tool called CodeSuite in
I remember that.
2011.
Yeah.
And that was my foray when I decided to leave the agency for a lot of reasons, which I think is a completely different podcast. But I had the opportunity to go work there, and they on the thought leadership team under Jeff Roars, and got to build a content marketing team out there, and got to travel the world speaking at conferences. So that was my first foray into marketing and scaling and high growth software, which I fell in love with at ExactTarget.
When you talk about content marketing those days, I would imagine, and from experience, believe that content marketing was a very different beast at that point than it is currently, huh?
You know what? I've been asked this recently. I don't think that it is. I don't think it's much different. I mean, you have different tools. The technology landscape has changed, but I'm still investing in content development. I'm still investing in organic search. I'm still investing in community development on social. It might be TikTok now instead of MySpace or Twitter or X. Sorry, Elon. But the fundamentals, like anything in marketing, the fundamentals are similar. The strategy is similar. It's just about the form that's changed. So I would argue that, are we producing massive surveys and ebooks? We still are. Whether or not people think, they still work. It's a little bit different, but not that much different. And it's been 12 years.
Well, like you said, it's the topography of like where folks' attention is, but the fundamentals are very, very similar. So you went from ExactTarget, they got acquired by Salesforce. You're in this big beast, and where'd that go? And I say that knowing that like you're there and you were there. I mean, as people move through things like acquisitions and stuff like that, sometimes they stay for a long time, sometimes they stay for a short time. But it seems like you were bit by the bug again to kind of jump into some smaller companies, and smaller, relatively speaking, but really cool companies after Salesforce. Were there anything that you learned from being at Salesforce that got you going, you know what, I want to go this direction with my career, or this is really cool with a company in this particular stage in its growth?
I learned pretty quickly that I was not, at that time, I was not built for the process and structure that was in place at Salesforce, because now they were much smaller than they are today. But I was reporting to an SVP in San Francisco that I talked to maybe once every 2 weeks, and had a bunch of VPs in between me and him. And I couldn't figure out what career growth would look like. And I knew I wanted to be a CMO. I watched Tim Kopp do what he did at ExactTarget. I knew I wanted to lead marketing. I knew that was a passion of mine and that I would be good at it. So when the job came up at OpenView, which is a VC firm based in Boston, the opportunity was really interesting to me because I got to move to a tier 1 city, prove to myself that I could do that and work in that environment. And working at a B2B, like a SaaS VC firm, is getting your MBA in software, because you get to see a ton of companies. You get to work with companies that we invested in. And so it was a good 2 years. And Lessonly, where I went after that, was a portfolio company of OpenView. And that was my first VP of marketing role, true VP of marketing role at a software company, was when I moved back to Indianapolis from Boston to take the Lessonly role.
I didn't know if I realized that you had moved out to Boston.
I lived there for 2 years. And when we had our first kid, the Lessonly role opened up and I was leaving OpenView. And that it just made complete sense that we would move back around family with our first kid. And the Lessonly job was one that I wanted.
That's awesome. So now you are the CMO at Jellyfish. And right after I asked if you'd be on the podcast, I actually found, and I don't even remember where it was, but there's a list of like top 50 CMOs to follow or whatever it is in 2024. And you were on that list. And I was like, hey, I know that guy. And I think that's awesome, to have seen that, and for you to be chugging along is not the right way to say it, but you're
It feels like that.
You're deep. I mean, I think we're roughly similar ages, and so oftentimes it feels like some of those lists highlight certain type of people and not others, or people of a certain age and not others. But like, you've been doing this for quite some time. Can you share with me a little bit about Jellyfish and maybe at a high level, kind of the marketing? What does the marketing team or makeup look like at Jellyfish that you've built?
Yeah, so Jellyfish is software that helps engineering leaders, R&D leaders measure the effectiveness and productivity of their teams. I mean, that's a very dumbed down version for a great platform from a marketer. And so for us, it's a technical product that we sell to technical buyers, and it's a category that's evolving. So that's part of the reason why this job was so interesting to me 2 years ago, was that there was money being put into the category, competitors were coming into the category, and it made complete sense to me that the tool was needed, right? Like, you can imagine sales reps when Salesforce was first introduced. You're like, what the hell are you talking about? You're gonna measure everything that I'm doing and keep an eye on me, and how am I going to be more productive with a CRM? And so Jellyfish is the Salesforce for R&D teams. So it's I can see it. It was clear. The mission statement's been the mission statement from the very beginning when the founders raised their seed round in 2017. Marketing looks like we definitely have a focus on demand gen. We have a revenue marketing team that focuses on inbound contribution to pipeline, as well as supporting all of pipeline and bookings with the sales team and the CSM team for CSM team, especially for expansion. We've got content, we've got brand, we have events, and we also have enablement, which is supporting the sales team mostly on competitive stuff, and then product marketing, of course. So it's a focus. I'd say it's 50-50. Well, let's say 50, 30, 20. 50's on demand gen, 30's on more of the internal support of the teams and competitive and win-loss and messaging and positioning, and then 20's like overall brand, creative, and how do we ship things that are interesting and fun.
How much of that was there when you came on board?
We've pretty much rebuilt the team completely over the past 2 years.
When you did that, where did you start?
Demand gen. It's such a hard question because hindsight is everything. And the marketing leader in place before, brilliant job, built a brilliant team for that time frame. It's so important to note the different time frames that high growth software goes through, because you have cash that you are investing into the company. And so the amount of change and maturity that the company goes through in a small amount of time is huge. So at the time, it was perfect for the company. And I started on demand, and marketing ops is where we rebuilt. And then I moved to product marketing. And then we moved to like, how do we think through content, brand development, creative? How do we make sure we look 100 times bigger than we are? How do we take what I know is the great taste? I think good marketers have to have great taste. And how do you make it look great, as well as it being effective in driving demand and revenue?
If you were to do that again today, how would you do it different? You said hindsight, right? So I'm wondering if
hindsight in terms of I have a hard time saying I would have built the team differently than the past marketing leaders have. And that's at any company I've joined, right? Because every stage is different. Hindsight for me, my hindsight is always, I could have moved faster in any job I've been in. But I think that's mostly in my head, and something that I've spent hours with a therapist trying to get over than it is true fact, right? Because I think it drives a lot of what I do. The having a sense of urgency and trying to move as quickly as possible, which sometimes is defeating, but that's probably more in my head than anything else.
Considering all of the different sort of roles that you've played, are you able to share with me the biggest marketing challenge that you had? Like one where you were just like, oof, I gotta kind of go off experience here and have some faith that this is going to do X, Y, and Z. And how did you overcome that?
There's actually two things that worked and one I failed miserably. And it was at Leslie. Leslie is what I can kind of speak to. I mean, Seismic had its own. When Leslie was acquired and I moved into the executive team at Seismic, that's a whole nother thing that is more around personal burnout and how I handled it. But for Leslie, the first one was our CFO flagged that organic traffic was dropping. We had no idea on the marketing side.
Wow.
For some reason. He flagged, he was like, I see this dropping. I look at the dashboards and we realized that the website was completely like the performance of the website was terrible. And so Google was starting to ping us and degrade our search rankings because of that. And so we pulled the entire marketing team out of like the physical office and put them in a separate office. And we rebuilt the site in 7 weeks from the ground up, had a contract development agency that came in and we had developers that were sitting in the office with us and it rebounded. And that was really, really difficult to swallow because I wasn't seeing it. The second one was we completely ungated everything except the demo request at Leslie, where it cut down the majority of our funnel, but it led to more bookings in the future because it was better converting. And then the third one was I decided early on that I wasn't going to invest in a senior product marketer at Leslie, and I was going to reinvest it into the brand. In hindsight, terrible idea because it was extremely difficult for us to move up market because we didn't have somebody thinking about segments and we didn't have somebody thinking about total addressable market, pricing and packaging, competitive. It was piecemealed across the entire company. And that was a mistake on my part. I should have hired a senior product marketer earlier on in that company. Now, it's again, like I said, it's hindsight. We got bought for 300 million cash. It was great. We did well. But could it have been 50 million in revenue instead of 30? It's all, you can debate that all day long. But those have been the harder parts. And then for me personally, it's been just managing my expectations for myself. I mean, that's probably the more difficult thing is how do you transition and grow as a human being and make sure that you are prioritizing the right things with the understanding that a lot of my self-worth is built in my career and it always has been. And having kids kind of helps with that, but
I want to dig into that. I can relate to it, and I've been hearing that with a few things that you were talking about, right? You used the word burnout for just a second. You talked about sort of the expectations that you were putting on yourself to possibly move a little bit faster in this area and that area. How has that changed or evolved over your career? And that happens a lot with especially with self-driven individuals, that are just really, I'm more talking about where I'm coming from than I am trying to do any sort of self-diagnosis, but I can relate essentially in that sense. So how has that evolved over time with that? When you describe that burnout, what is that for you and how have you sort of been tackling that? Because, marketing, especially in this high growth space, also is very much tied to this like performance and growth of the entire company. You feel like you're having an effect on the entire business at that perspective. So it's a tense thing to be tied to.
There's tons of ways to manage it internal. like internal expectation setting with teammates and peers. But for me personally, like on the personal side, I have learned that being present with family is important. It's very difficult for me to do. And also, it seems simple, but like exercise. Honestly, like those are the two things that if I can set aside time to make sure I'm present with my kids where I don't feel like I'm being a terrible human being, I'm exercising on a daily basis, that is 80% of it for me. Now, the self-worth thing has transitioned where I find value in other places, like my kids, like my partner. But I still put a ton of my self-worth into my job and into the way I do my job. And so failure hits harder because of that, but it's mostly how do you get over the head trash? And for me, the head trash is making sure I'm healthy and I'm, a lot of my working through issues comes on a treadmill. So for me, it's been, that's, if I, I've only been really doing it actively on a daily basis for the past 2 years. And that's been hugely helpful for me. And then conversations with peers, of course, is always good where you can commiserate with people. But for me, it's been those two things. Because I'll never get rid of that self-worth because it drives me. And whether people agree with it or not, my mood changes drastically based off of how well the job is going.
I can absolutely relate as someone who actually, who owns a business, right? And
yeah. I mean, you've got more to do.
I think that's what drove you. I'm sure when it came to you starting your businesses as well, it's part of that entrepreneur mindset as well. That's there.
Yeah, it is. It is.
And the business is going to be 18 years old, and so. It feels a little bit like a child that's not going to end up moving out anytime soon. And how old are you? How many kids do you have, and how old are they?
I have two kids, 6 and 8, two boys.
So yeah, my son's 8.5, and again, maybe I think of a similar age, and so there's so much cool stuff that comes, I think, from having kids who look up to you and who don't care about the stuff that's going on at the business, right? And so they're seeing the world anew and fresh. And my son, if I'm not in the best mood because of X, Y, and Z going on with like the business or whatever, my son's like, "You're the man. Like, what are you talking about? You can't feel that way. You're this and you're that." I think the other day I said something about. He's like, "What's going on?" I'm like, "I'm frustrated." He's like, "You can't be frustrated. You're blah 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 blah." And I was like, "All right, dude. All right." So. I can totally relate to that. I want to be sensitive to your time because I know normally I love to talk longer, and you are busy moving and grooving with some hiring and stuff that you've got going on. So if you just give me a couple minutes here to kind of wrap up with you. So and I would definitely like to have you back to kind of peel back some of the other things as well and get a little bit deeper on your thoughts. On what's going on out there in the marketing world and everything. But what, for those folks out there that are aspiring to kind of have maybe a similar career path, I've talked with folks that their career path is just like all over the place. They didn't think they were going to get into marketing, and then they did. And yours is a bit more, I'm not going to say it's not linear, but it is purposeful in a particular direction in regards to the different businesses you've worked in and the roles that you've worked in and so on. What do you, for those that are aspiring to kind of level up what it is that they're doing in marketing and possibly get into that leadership role or the C-suite, what's the one thing that you're you could go back and kind of look at, and then maybe even in the future and kind of look at that they could be thinking about to prepare themselves for that sort of trajectory?
I mean, look, I think that there's two things. One is got to manage people. You need to put yourself in a situation where you can manage people, whether that's one person, 3 people, 10 people, whatever. I had the opportunity to do it very early in my career at ExactTarget, where I built out a content marketing team, right, which I mentioned before. And I had some employees at Brandswag. I think the second thing is, what I learned at Lessonly was you have to ask for it. And our CEO, Max, was, at the time, my boss. I really wanted the CMO role. And we walked through, like, he wanted me to map out, like, why do you think you deserve it? Like, what do you want? What have you done? Like, what can you do in the future? And that taught me a lesson, which was, if you want it, ask for it. Because usually people aren't thinking about it. And I think a lot of times we believe that we should be given something without asking for it. And that's usually not the case. People don't think about you as much as you think about yourself. So those are the two things. I mean, you got to manage people, you got to ask for it, and, believe in yourself. I mean, that's you need to go for it.
That actually tells me a lot about, as I was refreshing myself on your work history and seeing you go from what I believe was the SVP role at the VP role to the CMO role at Lessonly. I was like, okay, so they just saw that he was there and they needed somebody to go into that role. But I think that's such a critical thing that you just talked about, that you took the initiative to do, and the process that happened there to go from that to taking over that CMO.
Yeah, and you have to look. You've got to deliver. You can't just.
Sure.
I think a lot of times people assume that because you're doing a bunch of busy work, you should get promoted. I mean, I owned a number and I continue to own a number, and I think marketing leaders should own a number and should care about bookings and revenue. And the only way you're going to get a seat at the table is if you do that.
I want to be mindful of your time. Normally at the end of the episode, I allow you to ask me one question, but I'm going to say,
we'll do it quickly. What's
okay.
your one piece of advice for people? Let's see. Let me frame this differently. One piece of advice on how you maintain performance over 18 years of running a company. That's a long time. You have a teenager.
It's a collective of your employees, It's a collective of your partners, a collective of your clients, and that you actually, to your point of like, manage people, but you just generally have to be able to handle relationships well, and you have to understand that this is an organism, and things can be mutually beneficial, especially whenever possible, to all those stakeholders, so that everybody is just interested in everybody else's sort of success. And that for me to grow the business doesn't mean that I'm trying to find out how to make the most money for myself necessarily, but that I'm finding a way to share in the success and contribute in the ways that possibly I'm uniquely capable of as a leader in this position. So it took me too long. I think if I were to look in retrospect, I would have started that way earlier. And the business would be even further along in that 18-year journey, more quickly, but that's what I would have done.
Hindsight,
my advice. Yeah. Kyle, I'm super happy to have reconnected with you in person here again. Maybe next time when I'm in Indianapolis, I can reach out.
Let me know.
Go to Bottle Works or something like that, which is where we got to go have some fun. I really am happy to hear all the success that you have, and hope that it continues to absolutely be the case. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.